Good morning, and welcome back for the next session. So some interesting discussions this morning. I've had some good feedback from the presentations that were delivered this morning. So thanks again for those presentations. And maybe what we're going to do for this session is looking at navigating change. So we'll of course be discussing a little bit more of the intricacies of how we go about navigating the change. We have a good panel that we've put together that bring together some different perspectives and some ideas on some of the challenges that are going ahead and how we might address them. So we of course have Olivier Tourard who's a Customs and Tax Director from Jeffco. We have Rachel Sellers, who's Supply Chain Principal Consultant at SMMT Industry Forum. Christina Mileva, who's the founder and COO of Dovu, a new startup organization. And of course, Juan Manuel Santiago Mendez, who's the CEO for Mercedes-Benz Parts Logistics UK. So first up, I'd like to invite Olivier to come up and give the first presentation. So please, thank you very much.
Thank you. So, thank you very much. I'll have to be careful because the last time someone spoke about Brexit, we had problems on my left. So, I'll be very careful with what I say. So, navigating change. We will speak about Brexit case. Just very quickly a few dates. You probably know all of them, but it can be important to come back. So Brexit was voted for on June the 23rd, 2016. Following this referendum, Article 50 of the Lisbon Agreement has been activated by Great Britain, and therefore Great Britain will leave the European Union at the latest on March the 29th, 2019. That's the point, next year. The negotiation of the withdrawal agreement are in progress, but are still ongoing on several subjects, including the difficult question of border management between Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland. Exchanges, as you know, are currently in progress to try to reach an agreement by the end of October, but probably more mid-November. This is probably the last date. And if a deal is agreed, it will need to be approved by UK and European Parliament. And this by January means, we hope, before Christmas. So in fact, we have three options. First option is it's impossible to find a deal, means European Union and UK decide there's no negotiation possible and they stop. This is a no-deal option. Second option, a deal is agreed, but European Parliament or UK Parliament decide not to ratify it. This is option 2. And option 3, the best one, of course, a deal is agreed and ratified by both parliaments. In the unlikely no-deal scenario 1 and 2, in fact it is 2 no-deal scenario, this will result in a hard Brexit situation. That means that in March, the 29th next year, midnight EU time, precise, Great Britain will become a third country without any international agreements. That's the point. In case of scenario 3, a deal, which is a deal ratified by UK and EU Parliament, a transition period will start from March the 29th, 2019, up to December the 31st, 2020. So it will be nearly 2 years more. So when we speak about transition period, what does it mean? Transition period means that UK will become a third country anyway, but rules between EU and UK won't change. This is the idea of the transition period. So EU and UK will have 2 years, nearly 2 years, to negotiate a future trade agreement. It's very short when you know that usually it takes 5 years to negotiate an FTA, but as we are really working already together, everybody thinks it's possible in 2 years. To make sure, also an important point, to make sure that rules of origin won't change, EU already said that they will add an appendix in all their FTA to add UK with all the agreements, today's agreements, because UK will be a third country. If they don't do it, it means even during transition period, we will have subject and problems with origins. So this is already decided to add UK in our trade agreements, in EU trade agreements. And transition period will postpone Brexit effect up to December the 31st, 2020. So it also means you will have 2 years for market and regulation intelligence. Internal analysis, I mean, it's a few months more to do what you should already have done, in fact, but to be prepared. Now, what does mean hard Brexit? What does it mean? And what is the potential impact on your supply chain? That's the question. And in case of transition period, UK, as I said, will become a third country without any international agreements. That's the basics. So to understand what it means, today, UK benefits from more than 750 international EU agreements over the world. So if you don't have these agreements, you start from nothing. So no customs union, no more common market. That's a big point. That's why we speak about hard Brexit. So automotive industry will have to face a lot of new challenges. Companies will have to apply the same rules, the same customs rules, to goods moving between EU and the UK on both sides, as currently apply with goods moving to or from third countries. I'll take a few examples, but we don't have so much time, so I will go as quickly as I can. The first one is that each time goods will cross a border, you will have to perform a customs clearance, export and import. I know that on UK side, negotiators say that they want to have a smooth border, simplified procedure and everything, but anyway, between the third country and EU, you will have declarations, customs declarations. As it has been already said this morning, that's a point. A compliant documentation. When you speak about customs, it means documentation. So a compliant documentation will be required. Companies must have a compliant invoice before each departure of goods. I mean, could be easy to say it, just it is not as in automotive industry works today. We are not issuing invoices before departure. A lot of you are using self-invoicing at destination or invoicing at the end of the month, or I don't know, a lot of different options. So you will need an invoice before departure to make sure you will cross the border. And this invoice will have to be compliant, of course. Duties to be paid will correspond to the basic rules of the WTO, which means because there will be no preferential agreements. So for automotive parts, it's usually around 4%, and for finished vehicles, it's more around 10% if you are not using inward or outward processing, but you cannot always use them. Transit time will include border control for customs and security checks. Even if ports and customs are ready before March the 29th, which is not sure at all. On UK side, I don't know, but on European side, there's still a lot of work to do to be ready. We will and we can face disruptions at borders. Also, companies must check their Incoterms. I mean, you have to analyze all the supply chains, and Incoterms are a very, very important point because when you you will have to manage customs and tax in your own country. So, Incoterms like ex-works for sales should be forbidden. If you want to use it, you can, but you will have to be very careful. And DDP for purchase also, because in those both cases, you are not managing yourself VAT and duties, and customs could be performed on your behalf, but you don't know it. That's a risk. VAT rules will change also. So we have two VAT rules in Europe, the 8th and the 13th. Today, as a European country, UK is using the 8th directive, and we'll have to move to the 13th, the one which is used by third countries. It means a lot of things, like about VAT registrations, VAT management, VAT refund, and the way of you are managing your flows. A lot of car makers are using VAT registration in countries, in a lot of European countries, to move some goods from one storage to another, to sell in a country and everything. So it has to be analyzed deeply to understand the impact on your activity. For European companies, purchased goods customs origin may also have an impact on their own production's origin. Just an example, if I produce in Europe and I purchase some goods in UK, some parts in UK, the question is my production from European origin or not? If the goods are coming from UK, and if UK is a third country, perhaps not. It can change a lot of things to my customers because I cannot issue anymore certificate of origin saying it's European. So a lot of things about origin will have to be analyzed. Probably we won't have any mutual recognition for AEO, for certifications. We also have questions about REACH registrations, REACH authorizations. It's about chemical products. So a lot of questions are still ongoing and still pending. So that's why it's a big subject for automotive industry today. But we spoke about Brexit several times, so I understood. Yeah, and you say you all voted this morning to say yes, Brexit is for me, but I'm not prepared. That's the message this morning. So to conclude, I would say that automotive industry now have to prepare for hard Brexit. We have been saying that for months. A few companies already prepared plans, but it has to be done now. So companies must analyze their exposure to Brexit and identify their risks and actions. Even if we don't have a hard Brexit, and we all hope for a transition period, tomorrow UK will be a third country from a European point of view. So anyway, you have to be prepared. Perhaps you won't pay duties, we hope, but you will have to perform customs declarations. You will have to make sure your Incoterms are correct. The biggest part of what I said will apply in 2 years. Anyway, so what you're doing is not lost. So just get prepared today. That's the message. And I would say time is running. It's 6 months to Brexit. And yeah, if we will have a question after the Q&A period session, and also think tank this afternoon if you want to speak more about frictionless trades. Thank you.
So thanks very much, Olivier. It was, of course, just highlighting some of the key facts and milestones that we need to address. And of course, maybe we'll of course come back and have a little bit of discussion. And I'm sure you've got some questions for Olivier that we can come back to as well. So next up, I'd like to invite Rachel Sellers from Industry Forum to give us some of her perspectives on what she thinks is happening. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hi. I want to really pick up on where Olivier finished. The overview of this session really is to talk about changes. I think Brexit is obviously a hot topic today. But how are we going to work our way through that? What skills are required to take us through that journey? What are the changing requirements in infrastructure and logistics? And what are the challenges of change? I think whether that's Brexit or otherwise, change is always difficult in any environment. Any business we can talk about is fundamentally the same. We've got costs, we've got profits, corporate functions, different departmental functions, and operations. We need the strategy. If we're going to change, how are we going to change? That encompasses broad kind of outline goals, values, how we compete with each other. We then need to look at the market. So what are our customers demanding? We're seeing changes already in automotive around the types of vehicles that people are wanting, the types of technologies. How do those two join together? Functionally, how are we going to achieve that? I think this is where the supply chain element comes in and the logistics of that. Cost, quality, time, flexibility. How are we going to marry all of those elements together to deliver to the customers and achieve our corporate goals? Capability really is, I think, one of the biggest risks in implementing any change. What is your current capability within your business? What capability do you need? And then what have you got planned? Often the understanding of the capability needed and that you currently have in the business is very different. And it's transitioning that which can often be the biggest kind of barrier to getting any change through. If I talk about balancing demand and supply, again, in a very broad sense, it really doesn't matter what industry or what sector we're talking about. It's very much the same. So the demand from the customers and from the customers within the supply chain is kind of encompassed by on-time delivery. They want good quality. They want it at a competitive price. They want good service. People now naturally expect to get discounts when they're buying significant quantities. If you balance that off against the supply management, well, all of those things that you can see there, what are the costs of ordering? What's your cost to serve through transport, storage, transaction, inventory, and obsolescence and aging? I think for people in this room, the leaders in the industry, you've probably got a very good handle on your inventory. You work in a very just-in-time way. Obsolescence and aging maybe isn't such an issue for yourselves. If you look further down the supply chain, particularly through sort of the SMEs within the supply chain, they have massive issues around obsolescence, aging. They don't have the same processes and technology, knowledge and experience within those businesses. So the demand and supply can kind of tip the further down the supply chain that you go. People often ask, myself and others at Industry Forum when we go in, to support them in change projects. And one of the most common things that I see and that others in the organisation see is they don't have a good benchmark of where they are now. So something I always say to people is, you want to change, but what do you want to change? What's bad? What doesn't work? What works well that you want to keep? I think people nowadays and the big data movement are drowning in data. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of masses and masses of data. I think people spend so much time collating data and presenting it, and they don't really do anything with it. For me, it's really about deciding as part of your corporate strategy, what do you want to do, how are you going to measure that, and what actions are you going to take from the data and from the results that you see. If you're not going to do anything with it, don't bother. Don't bother recording it. I think there are different types of data that we need to understand as well. So not just internally within your business, but within your suppliers and your customers. Geographically now we're seeing big changes in where we need to be positioned. So the center of gravity is where might they be now, where might they be if things are outsourced through more of Europe, where is the demand coming from for the car market, used cars, new cars, where is that shift going, and where do you need to move your business to support that? Just a few kind of figures here from SMMT data around end customer. So we're seeing sort of trends within the new car market that slightly up in sort of certain periods, but year to date down, in line with expectations. So I think it's useful to use this data as well to kind of compare against your own business strategies and strategies within the marketplace to just kind of check that whatever we're thinking is staying consistent, and do we need to revise our plan and make some changes to that as we see figures change. There are different tools that you can use. So IATF is quite well known within the automotive world to measure and benchmark to help you understand your current position, strengths and weaknesses. The aims of IATF are obviously there to develop consensus, to help suppliers throughout the network and the chain, to implement those policies and procedures. A couple of you I've spoken to around getting other documented policies in place to assist with Brexit. They're all kind of linked. The more you can have documented and good evidence of policies of how you deal with things and how you're going to mitigate risk, the better position you will be in for moving forward and managing the risks that may come as part of Brexit. And there's also then training provided to support those IATF requirements. Another project that's currently ongoing, which will be sort of coming into force in the coming months, hopefully, around benchmarking and understanding where you sit, is the NMCL program. So we can see here different elements of that. So all the way through the supply chain, what's your competitive strategy from the business? How are you going to manage those new technologies, introductions, and lifecycle management of that? The supply chain underpinning all of that, and the flow of goods and services through the manufacturing operations and the logistics. These are all different things that you can be doing now and working with your suppliers to do now to really get a good understanding of where you are currently and what can you do right now to improve things that are going to put you in a better position for whatever change happens next March. So moving on to that, I just really want to talk about the plan for change and the different kind of levels of planning that people can do. There's probably lots of talk going on around strategic planning, and I think particularly within, those of you in the room who are in quite large organizations, you've got the knowledge and expertise, the manpower to come up with these different strategies and model different things. These are typically longer range. There may have been some form of analysis, some different kind of cuts of things that may happen. And it's broadly based on judgment because nobody really knows what's going to happen. I think we're seeing less and less of the tactical planning, so much more analysis into the physical operations of how we might implement those different strategies and changes and what that may mean. Again, I think that's more telling the further down the supply chain that you go into the lower businesses there that just don't have the knowledge or the time to develop these plans right now. So there are three kind of tiers for me. So strategic, as we've talked about, the core areas that we're all focused on. So costs, values, technologies, things that we need to invest in. We've then got tactical, so sales and operations planning, market planning, all that kind of thing. So physically, how are you going to meet those new plans? And then operations. So on the shop floor, what do you need to do? And this can be anything from transport, distribution, logistics to purchasing decisions that need to be made differently. We're kind of at a point here where everybody does need to start having those collaborative conversations, and I think even within your own businesses, out to your customers and out to your suppliers, we need to start sharing that information. It may all be well and good that you've come up with a plan to say, right, we're going to increase our inventory by 2 weeks, and that means we're going to order X amount additional stock. If your suppliers aren't aware of that and they haven't told their suppliers and they haven't told their suppliers, do you reasonably think that that's going to be an easy thing to do? I would suggest not. If we talk about the different planning levels, again, in terms of horizons and when we need to do it, the different levels, we've talked a lot about strategic planning today. It's more the short-term planning of manufacturing, daily planning, weekly planning, operations, finished goods in and out, that's going to really be the bottleneck, I believe, in implementing those plans. I think this falls into the next kind of level, and when people talk about training, and I've had a few conversations here with people today around training and what people mean by that. I think there is a bit of a chicken and egg situation with training where people will say we need people to be trained and there's a lack of skills, and it's definitely something that we at IF hear a lot. But when you dig into that and say, well, in what area do they need training? What are the skills that they don't have? People tend to clam up and they're not really sure, and it's one of those things that kind of comes out as you go through trying to implement a plan or do a new project, that everybody suddenly realizes that, well, that team, that function within the business doesn't really have an expert. There's not any training there, and that's how things tend to perform. I think in line with the top level plans down through the lower levels, there needs to be another slant on it to say, well, who are the people that are going to be doing this? Who's going to be leading it through? Can we collaborate with other people where they've got expertise and knowledge that we can share with our teams to make sure that there are the people in place to do that? And if you look here at different planning responsibilities from a supply chain point of view, whilst business planning and strategy at a very high level is probably something that we're all aware of, detailed planning, capacity of on-the-day production of what people are going to do, again, at the lower level, tier 1, tier 2, SME, individuals within the supply chain, they're the doers on the shop floor, they're just the schedulers. They're not really thinking of the 10-year strategy, they're thinking of how am I going to get through the day, how am I going to get the goods out of the door, and minimize the risk of that. So I think typically what we see, and I think if we can kind of look at this broader as well into different teams within our supply chain across maybe different businesses, is organizations at the moment have quite separate plans, and I think this is quite common. So there may be a big financial plan or a business plan, but how that transitions into the HR plan for training and staffing that, how that links to the marketing plan, how that links to sales and their objectives, can be a bit disjointed. What I believe and what Industry Forum want to support the industry to do is to come together with joined up planning. So how do all of these things link together? How are you going to get your strategy right through to your physical production of not just yourself, but your suppliers and their suppliers and their suppliers? And how are you going to support each other through that planning and through various different requirements that people have to make sure that you can all achieve that together? So we're probably quite used to seeing here the planning dynamics are driven from customers. I know a few people have touched on it, the customer demands are changing. We're probably quite used to sort of the understanding that customers dictate really the value that they expect, what products they want, services, delivery that they're willing to accept, and that passes through really to all of us into how we're going to service that customer demand. I think the same is also true of suppliers. So suppliers will dictate the value at which you can get your products. The less information that you share with their suppliers, the less buying power that they have, the less knowledge that they have. They can't take advantage of sort of higher quantity purchases and discounts because they're not confident in what orders are going to come. They'll dictate what service you can have and the delivery because they don't have the knowledge and the view unless we start sharing it with them. So I think it's time to kind of look at both ends of the supply chain, the customers and the suppliers, and try and bring those together. If we talk about supplier sourcing, I think, again, it's something that for people in this room, we're probably much more towards the deep orange scale of this. So we tend to have and see more strategic alliances and better partnerships. I think it's everybody's responsibility in this room now to start transferring that down the supply chain and help your suppliers implement that collaborative relationship that you have and you see with their suppliers as well. Just a few sort of strategic sourcing objectives I'm sure you're all aware of. So to establish collaborative relationships, to reduce the risk, to be more responsive, to integrate supplier input, to reduce costs and spending. A lot of people here are kind of aware that any Brexit will bring any change, and it's probably going to impact at some point on the ability to respond. I think if we look at the flip of that, there are probably things that we could do right now to improve the responsiveness as it currently stands throughout the supply chain. I think what people need to start looking to do is to make improvements now to try and mitigate that as much as they possibly can. You know, if to get through Brexit you need to hold an extra week's inventory, well, how can you reduce your inventory right now by a week so that when Brexit hits, we're in exactly the same position that we're in now? There are things that people could do now to improve so they're in an even better position for when Brexit hits. Just some advantages here again. I'm sure it's all things that you know, but it does enable that sharing of technology. It makes products easier to manufacture and assemble because we're not having time wastage of stoppage and things being late and having all those issues. The more we collaborate and the more we're open with each other, we've got fewer design changes and fewer quality problems, and we can address those quality problems sooner. It saves time, resources, and is faster to market, all things that people are, I'm sure, concerned about given the current climate. So how are we going to do this? So it's all very well and good for me to sit here and say we need to collaborate more, but how do we do that? A very easy way is through formal supplier scorings, assessments, so not just cost factors, but competitive factors as well. And it's not just assessing this and scoring this. How are we going to support each other to improve? Through a lot of the assessments that I've mentioned there, IATF and MCL, a typical poor scoring area is all in that supplier relationship management, collaboration area. So I think the more that we can do to improve that, the better. Again, how are we going to do that? It really falls down to technology. We've touched on things like blockchain. Blockchain is fantastic. I think there's a big barrier to implementing things like blockchain with the current technology that's available to, again, not yourselves, but those smaller customers. In order to kind of understand and have those meaningful conversations, we've got to have data sharing. We've got to have mechanisms by which that's easy. Even things, you know, basic things like forecasting support and linking your CRM applications through to your customers is not something really that many of the lower level suppliers are doing. They don't have the capital to invest in that kind of technology. They don't have the people to do it. They don't have the experience of doing it. So I think it's, again, another area of technology that if we can start assisting people within the supply chain to get on board with these technologies, to help them and share that information, then it will make it a lot easier. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. It's really interesting. I think, again, talking about how we manage this across the supply chain and look at the collaborative models as well that we need to design. Going back to Martin's point that he made earlier this morning, when he goes to your suppliers and asks for a 5% reduction in cost, and how are you going to achieve that? But also, then how do you then feed that down the line in terms of your total supply chain as well? But we'll discuss that more moving forward as well. But next up, I'd like to introduce Christina Mileva from Duvo, who's got something a little bit different for you, and maybe stimulate some new ideas of how we might approach these problems as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I guess that I'm gonna go in the topic of change, but I'm gonna take you to my journey, and that's a very interesting one. In my previous life, I was a lawyer. A few years ago, I took a completely different route and entered the world of transportation and blockchain technologies. And together with my co-founder, Irvin Watkins, we founded a business that was trying to solve the many issues that the transportation sector is currently facing. What we're using is the blockchain technology, the fact that people get nudged and change their behavior, and the only way that you could do that is by using rewards. So we're using technology, nudge economics, and incentivization to help businesses achieve their goals and change the way people travel. I'm going to play a short video, which I hope is going to help you a bit to understand what I'm talking about.
People contribute to the future of their cities through actions. Smart cities needs smart citizens. Gamify mobility and accelerate innovation. Say hello to Dofu, a token you earn and spend by sharing and changing the way you travel. Whether you're working on connected cars, public transport, or autonomous vehicles, the Dove token facilitates a new transfer of value. Transactions are secure and reliable, even when you don't know each other. Smart contracts define the agreement between individuals and connected things to share and transact in a transparent and controllable way. Tokenized incentivization will power future business models. Join the movement. So I hope this helped a bit. I think that nowadays we're kind of stuck in a bit of a limbo. We do live in the present, the past, and the future when we speak about transportation. In a world where we speak more and more about autonomous vehicles, in a world where electric vehicles are fact and are on our roads, in a world where we actually speak about the need of a car or a public transportation, and in a world where we speak about a port that's going to help us go from A to B, it's very difficult to use the current business models that we have and adjust them and adapt them to what's coming our way. So that's why we thought that we could help businesses to do that change. And it's very, very difficult to make someone do something. And I'm sure that many of you wouldn't do anything that someone tells you to do, because that's not in our nature. But what if someone gives you a reward for a very simple action? What if someone tells you, do you know what? Instead of driving today, be more healthy, walk, get a bike, and then you do it, and then you get a reward. then how would that make you feel? So we looked at different types of existing incentive schemes, and some of them are great, some of them not that great. I guess that my personal favorite one would be the American Express type of scheme where you get your points, and it feels like there is a bit more where you could actually spend the points that you've earned, but that's it. So what if we look at a new type of incentive scheme? What if there was a scheme that would allow you to use your rewards within the bigger picture? What if that is within the transportation sector? So what we've created is exactly that, a tokenized incentivization that unlocks a unique reward system which is instantly redeemable across borders. And it doesn't matter whether you're working in the car sector or in the public transportation, whether you're in the e-bike business or ride-hailing or ride-sharing business, it doesn't matter. As long as you're within the transportation sector, you'll be able to redeem that reward. And the beauty of blockchain and the beauty of smart contracts brings you that interoperability between different systems. But it also breaks the closed walled gardens that every single business had built to protect themselves. And funny enough, that new model makes people think, makes people trust each other more, and makes people realize that walled gardens are not actually the way forward. So I'm going to focus a bit on a project that we've just completed with BMW. And it was an interesting one, a user case that we worked in partnership with Alphabet, where Alphabet wanted to prompt their users to give them a very, very simple thing, data, and that data was in relation to how many miles does a leaseholder do on a weekly basis. And you would think that they should know that. They don't, especially on the old vehicles. So how can you make a leaseholder do that? I'm going to play a short video which will show you how very easily, by logging in to the Alphabet app, you're creating your user details, your password, and then you're ending up on a landing page, which landing page navigates you in a very, very simple way as to what you need to do next. And while you're waiting for the account to be created, this is where the back-end stuff are working. This is where the blockchain is doing its magic. This is where the smart contracts are being triggered. So how do we capture mileage? Just very simple. Take a photo of the odometer of the vehicle, and that's it. Simple as that. And then again, the beauty of the smart contracts confirms and sends back that information, and that leads you to getting a reward. Simple as that. It's not difficult at all. And then you could see that you have the option of linking that to different currencies. You could actually swap that reward for real cash, real money, if you need to. And you could also redeem the tokens within an ecosystem, which includes not only the BMW ecosystem, but includes all the businesses, corporations, and governments which are within that bigger picture. So that was an amazing project, and these are a bit of the statistics that came out of it. All of us were pleasantly surprised because we had 79% active engagement within the users in the pilot. We ran that for 2 months, and there were 250 employees involved in that project. And what was really funny is that after the project ended, we had people coming back to us and asking us, we want to earn awards. Why are we not doing more? And when you add the gamification bit of it, when you create a bit of a competition inside, then it gets more interesting because people want to do it more because they want to be the first ones. So if you look at that small user case and apply that to your businesses and think about how can you gamify the user behavior, then this could be the answer to how could you do a smooth transition and how could you actually cope with the change in a better way.
And I know that probably it's very abstract and not really in line with the supply chain of things. So I'm just going to very briefly discuss the benefit of a blockchain, and more particularly, I'm not going to speak about the tech because I'm not a developer, but I'm going to speak about the smart contract bit. And I'm going to speak the smart contract bit not as a legally binding agreement, but as a piece of protocol, which pretty much represents a programmable contract that could be very, very simple, and that could say, if John takes a photo of his odometer Friday, 8 o'clock in the morning, then he gets 10 tokens for a word. That's it. At the moment when that photo is being taken, this is when the smart contract gets triggered, and this is when the rest is happening. So you don't need to be doing anything. The smart contract is a self-executing agreement which does it for you. And you could apply that. I'm sure that this is something that's more familiar to you, or at least some of you. So what about applying the smart contract in the supply chain? How would that look? How would that affect the cost of your business? When we're speaking about specifically cars, and they're just being produced in the plants, so what is the process of shipping that car and delivering that car to me as a buyer? Very, very long one. It takes months, and also very expensive one. So if you use technology, implement that within your systems where you have smart contracts which gets triggered every time when an action happens, then not only are you going to save money, but I bet you that the process would be way faster than it currently is. So I hope that you enjoyed my world, and I'll be more than happy to take questions after the final discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christina. That was a really interesting approach to see some of the work that you've been doing on that as well. We're moving to a kind of discussion part of the session now, and before I open it up to the floor, I'd first like to ask Juan to make some comments and just give us some perspectives that you have.
Good. So good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Juan Manuel Santiago. I come from Spain originally. I've been working with this fantastic company, Daimler, for 15 years now. Always in after sales, always in customer service. So I think it's important to talk about the customer, because at the end of the day, they pay our salary. Yeah. The people who pay our salary is the people who drive the Mercedes, the car, the truck, the van. I've been lucky to work in different countries, Middle East, now UK. I'm in charge of parts logistics UK, so spare parts, and also in charge of the South African team in Johannesburg. So quite interesting role, keep me busy. How to navigate the change, which is the question today. For me, it's quite simple. Enjoying the ride. We have to enjoy this. I mean, it's an exciting times. I think we didn't see that times or these kind of times in the last 100 years. We, as Daimler, we produce cars for 132 years now, and we have been producing cars, trucks, and vans for 132 years with that core business. And only in the last 5 years, we noticed, the core business must be there. Obviously, we have to produce cars, trucks, and vans, but the behavior is changing. And it's not changing in 50 years, it's changing in 2 or 3 years. It's changing in so quickly that probably we have to start thinking of how to adapt our business into a mobility setup in the future. I would say new generations probably are not interested anymore to own a car, but to own a service, to get into the iPhone, to get into the iPad or the telephone, the phone, and order something, pay a fee for a month or for a week, and enjoy an SUV for a week, and maybe next week they want to enjoy sport cars, and maybe the week after they don't want to have a car. Things like that could happen. So we have to make sure that the only way to navigate the change is to enjoy the ride, and the only way to enjoy the ride is to change the mindset. I think in logistics and in supply chain, probably in the OEM, our mindset has to change, and has to change to a very open one. We have to make sure that we are aware of what is going on out there, and we are able to react quickly. And when the colleague from Nissan had the presentation that I really enjoyed a lot, he got to the point. I mean, Brexit is one part of the whole thing, but it's not everything. I mean, electric cars are coming in a massive way. We have to make sure that the infrastructures are there, because obviously when we go home 7 p.m. and we charge a car, we want to have fridge, TV, and everything, right? We don't want to only charge the car but not enjoy life. So we have to make sure that infrastructure are there, and obviously not in every country will be there. Thinking about probably South Africa will be a challenge in the future. Hopefully UK won't be a challenge. Autonomous driving is coming. Complexity in supply chain, raw materials, suppliers, negotiations with suppliers, contact with suppliers. So at the end of the day, the picture, Brexit is there, and we cannot forget it. It's part of our business here, UK, but it's a piece of the whole puzzle, of the whole thing. Yeah. So let's be positive. Let's enjoy these years. Yeah? I think it's a good chance to change the mindset and create something new in supply chain, right?
Thanks very much. You're absolutely right. I think, of course, Brexit is the issue of the day that everybody wants to talk about. But there are numerous changes coming down the line from a technology perspective, and new startups entering the market, changing the behaviour, changing the way in which we use mobility is of course top of the agenda. And companies like yourselves are already changing that, right? And investing in other companies that are driving that change as well. I guess in terms of what you see is the next, what's the next big thing that you think would change in the next year, or maybe in the next 6 months, besides Brexit?
Main complexity for us is, again, we have to put the customer in the center, okay? We cannot forget that whatever we do, we have to think about how the customer is going to be affected, okay? So we are thinking, obviously, in a worst case scenario for Brexit, that's clear, because we don't know if it's going to be a hard or a soft one. I still think that if there is some common sense out there, should be soft, but because the damage could be really high. But we are preparing ourselves for a hard Brexit. How do we prepare for a hard Brexit? Obviously, in the current world, more stock, more capacity, preparing our dealers, our customers out there with communication, with more stock as well. Because at the end of the day, we have to take ownership of every single customer driving our vehicles. For me, it's easy to take ownership of my dad's big class, because he's my dad, obviously. When he goes to the workshop, he says, we don't have that brake disc, Wow, I have to take care of this now. We have to take care of this for every customer, So we have to put the customer in the center. If we do that, I think we will be able to solve the puzzle. In the next years, 1 to 2 years, we will see electric coming, okay, in a massive way. That means more spare parts in our business. We will see more new models. Obviously, all of us, all the OEMs, we are launching new models every year, which implies new part numbers. We are handling now extremely high number of different references. And if you want to keep the service level, you have to have them available, with probably, we're talking about probably 3,000 or 4,000 suppliers worldwide, everywhere. So for me, the complexity is our products are going more customized, more personalized, especially in passenger cars, but also in trucks and vans. How to combine the personalization of the vehicles with a standard process in the supply chain, but you cannot forget both. If a customer in Dubai is buying an S-Class with a specific color, we have to provide that part probably one day, So we have to keep the customer in mind, thinking that our processes should be standard as well, That's the big challenge for me today.
I think that's quite interesting, because I think also part of it goes back to what Rachel was saying also about how you manage that down your supply chain as well, right? And you of course, you're focused on spare parts side of things, but also the inbound to plant parts is the big challenge as well. So you've got those volumes. How do you manage that down your supply chain? What are the challenges of getting that visibility and keeping them up to speed of what your challenges are and how?
and link to Rachel, I think the training is extremely important today. I think probably we in supply chain, we try to forget a little bit that we have to keep the people trained, yeah, because what we do is, and I said, the colleague from Nissan said, what we do is quite efficient in theory. I mean, we do a proper efficient process in supply chain, but we don't try to think that we have to keep the whole company, the whole organization permanently trained, yeah, and skilled, not only in processes of SAP, but also in mindsets. And this is what we are doing in our company now. We are trying to transmit the mindset change from top to the bottom. We are spending a lot of time doing this to make sure that everyone understands that the business now is not like 5 years ago, and in 5 years' time, it won't be like today, yeah? And the whole organization has to be ready for this. So for me, training is one of the critical aspects as well, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of training, what areas? Because of course there's training for Brexit, there's training for the supply chain, there's training for new technologies. But, you know, where do you focus?
So we do a mix of kind of standardized training, a lot to support regulations and things that are mandated through IATF and all that kind of thing. But I think what we're seeing more demand for is bespoke training, so training where issues have arisen within the business or to help them change. And it's kind of what I would term like a hybrid of training and consultancy, where we'll go in and support a business through the change and then train the staff in various different departments, because it's not just the supply chain. So it's training those non-supply chain professionals in finance, in sales, for the senior leadership team. When they get all these new reports and standards, they need to be able to interpret them. So we kind of build the training specific to the business need, and I think that's what we're seeing more call for.
Sure. And from a Brexit, I know we spoke about this the other day as well, right? In terms of what training do you need for your people to deal with Brexit?
Yeah. If we speak about Brexit and supply chain and customs, yeah, we face a lot of subjects and problems, because we will need several hundreds of new customs clerks in Europe, and of course in UK, but also in Europe. We don't have the people today, that's clear. We need to train people, but also we need to train all the facility, our agency, local logistic agencies, everybody. Nobody knows how to work with a third country. I mean, in Europe, when we work with Brazil, people know how to do it. But today we work between Europe and UK, so they have to learn how to work. They have to learn. They have to check the documentation. They have to check a lot of things, and it will be training. It's not only customs team. It will be our customers. It will be our logistic teams. It will be, a lot of teams. Of course, we need training to have new people in customs organizations. Yeah, but that's a big subject. We are working on it also. Logistic providers are working on this subject to try to find options to have several hundred people trained before March, or if we can, before 2 years. It could be better.
Yeah, sure. And from a, I guess, as a startup, how do you instill that innovative mindset into that process as well, right? It's fine to train people, but you also want to train them to be able to think of new ways of meeting those challenges as well.
I guess that for us as a business, internally it's fairly easy, because you would get very like-minded people joining you on that journey. I think that for us, it's more the educational part rather than the actual training. And when I say educational part, I mean the conversations with not only the OEMs that we're holding, because we work with pretty much 70% of the tier 1 OEMs, but not only the OEMs, we work with governments, we work with public organizations, we work with Go Ahead in London. So it's that education as to what is the tech, how would that benefit the business that you're operating, and why you should try it. So for us, that would be the training / educational piece that we need to be doing, and we still do.
Great, thank you very much. Of course, this is an interactive discussion, so is there any questions from the audience at this moment? Okay, we're still a bit shy. It doesn't mean you get lunch any quicker, right? So we've still got time to make up. So I think going back to this point about innovative ways of handling problems, right? And you know, how you service the customer, as you said, right? So, you know, how do we talk about people training people in that sense. How do you identify, and I guess how do you get them to think about the customer first, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a challenge because I think in many cases we could be or might be quite far from the customer. Maybe we are quite busy thinking about processes or how to implement cost reduction programs, how to implement efficiency programs or whatever, not thinking in the customer at the end of the day. The way we keep it alive is making sure that most of the staff in the organization know the customer, okay? So they visit the customer, at least they visit the dealer, they work for a few days there. It's not the same. We in the OEM, we obviously have our dealer network, which is to say the inner circle, and they talk to the customers, yeah? So what we try to do is our staff in the headquarters are able to understand the customer at the end of the day and think about it, yeah? Think about them. And it's not only, as I said, my dad or my friend, it's everyone. It's a fleet who has 100 trucks, or it's a customer who has a Smart, or it's a customer who has a C-Class or whatever, yeah? Whoever is important for us. The only way to bring awareness is to be in front of the customer, in my opinion. And we try, obviously, we have a big team in the warehouse, in the warehouses, in the logistics centers. We cannot close the warehouse for a day and bring everyone to the dealer side, but we organize programs to make sure that most of the people know how dealership works, how the customer gives the car, how the customer is attended by the service advisor, all those things, yeah? Because it's also funny, most of us, especially in OEM, we are not customers. We have company cars, but when we have a problem with the car, we don't see what is behind, you know? Sure. We give the key to the fleet management team, they solve it, they give it the car back. We don't feel that, yeah? Probably it's the same for all the brands. I mean, if you work for Apple and you have a problem, probably you don't see what is behind, yeah? But it's important to see what is behind, so please, our company at least is putting the last years the customer in the center always. And whatever we do around is thinking the customer in the center, yeah. Supply chain is a big challenge because if we deliver 98% of the parts on time, probably nobody says, thank you very much. It's only the 2%, which is not there, is the one creating challenges, yeah? But at the end of the day, we have to make sure that there is a customer behind.
Yeah. And how do you then also instill that within your service providers as well? Because from a service provider perspective, you're the customer, but then actually you're not, you're the customer, but then you're the customer's customer, right? So how do you then instill that within your service providers to give you that extra level of service as well?
I can say we are a big organization, but we are quite well structured, so we have a good contact with the service providers, and obviously we try to make sure that it's not really an agreement, it's more like a partnership with them. We try to make a partnership with them so they can feel also that whatever they do at the end of the day is critical. I mean, if all the team in the logistics center, they prepare all the parts, 20, 30,000 parts a day or 40,000 parts a day, they prepare it on time, and then the service provider is not able to load the trucks, whatever is the reason, or we have overspill because we don't have enough capacity, then we spoil the whole thing, yeah, at the end of the day. So we make sure that we also do joint visits to key players, dealers, together with them. We involve them in our processes, 100%. It's not like you do it, yeah? We don't want to know what they're doing. It's exactly the opposite. We want to know what they are doing, yeah? It works very well. I have to say in the last, obviously, years, because of the growth in the country, it's also a challenge. Because of the lack of drivers, it's also a challenge. Sure. Lack of trucks, I could say as well. I would say this is going to be probably more difficult in the next years because of Brexit, yeah? I see one of the main challenges, how we are going to handle the proper transportation with the service provider in the next years within the Brexit, because we know that the workforce is going to be different, obviously. In our logistics center, 25% of the workforce is outside of the UK, people from Poland, Czech Republic, and so on. We know in the next years it's not going to be like that probably, and same thing for the drivers or the service provider, and this is going to be a big challenge, especially in terms of cost as well.
Yeah. So how do you going about addressing some of those challenges?
The subject. The subject of drivers. We focused on also because we don't exactly know what will be the rules next year. So. As far as I understood, 40% of the trucks coming from Europe to UK are Polish. So will you agree to still have Polish coming to UK tomorrow? I don't know. I guess yes. If not, we will have problems. But we have a big subject about drivers. Today already, I'm chair of the French logistic working group for Brexit. And some of the companies there are not, I'm customs and tax, but some of the companies are just logistic companies and transport companies. And some of them told us that it's already very difficult to find drivers to go to UK because of the migrants, because of all the problems to cross the border already today. And they just don't know how they will manage the fact tomorrow. So yes, that's a big subject. But this is, I spoke more about our customers just before, not about transport and our own subject, but of course, we have a big list of subjects about Brexit, transport and logistic organizations. So we have to find solutions, and we have to work with our customers to find the best options. That's what we started to do. We tried to, not to prepare on our side for Brexit, but just to discuss. I had a few meetings already with customers to understand what are the needs and what we can do. This is the point, how we can help and how we can be innovative, imagine new options, new solutions, to make sure it will be an easy way to transport goods tomorrow from UK to Europe and Europe to UK. But also a part of, we spoke about empty trucks, but a big part of the trucks are coming back in Europe empty. That's also a point, a problem for logistic organizations.
If I can add something, I hope it works, the challenge is also how you have to fly high, obviously, you have to see the innovation, you have to see the challenges, but going down again, don't forget the basics. In a business like ours, we need to deliver the parts every day and to get the parts every day. What do we need? Parts and trucks. So we need that, obviously we need that. The challenge today is we are thinking also about innovations, but sometimes the challenges are even, let's say, more easier than that. There are no trucks and there are no drivers. And this is a daily problem. So some days you get the proper service, and some days, whatever is the reason, you don't get them. And this is happening all over Europe. Yes. Obviously, we are much more affected in the UK, and we will be more affected in the UK, but it's happening everywhere. There is a lack of, call it, drivers. It's a big lack of drivers.
But the question is, how can innovation help us to cross the border in 2 hours instead of 3 days? That's also the question, one of the questions today. So how we can use options like you presented to link all the data, because if we want to go very quickly, also on UK side you work a lot on this, how can we get the data as quick as possible to make sure the drivers will go, and if they don't lose 2 or 3 days to go from one border to the other one, we will have more drivers tomorrow also. So that's why innovation is more, when I spoke about innovation, it was more about these kind of things. How can innovation help us to face the new disruptions we will have?
I guess that although I'm definitely keen support and believer in new technologies, I'm realistic about it, and I know that we're a few years before it could actually be applied in pretty much every single business. And it all goes back to data and how do you manage that data, and given that blockchain is a public ledger and given implications of GDPR, then again you need to be very careful what and how do you use that tech. So that would require a lot of training and a lot of thinking around how could you apply technology with the current situation and solve your problem. But definitely, as long as you have that data and you start thinking as to how could you be compliant, then I'm definitely optimistic that within the next few years that could be used in real life and could make all of our lives way easier.
Sure. Now, I guess what are also the collaborative models around that as well, right? Because capacity shortage, driver shortage, it's going to affect different suppliers at different times, right? So it's not every supplier has a shortage at exactly the same time, right? So then are there innovative models around that of how you're able to share that the capacity a little bit more evenly, if that makes sense?
We're not even considering the bulky batteries deliveries in the future. In 2 or 3 years, the batteries cannot cross the channel easily. Yeah, fly batteries from. I mean, it's like a big challenge. I think probably a couple of companies only are able to fly batteries out there. All the big companies, whatever, Emirates, Qatar, British Airways, they don't want to fly batteries massively. But probably in a few years, we're talking about a few thousands of units for every brand out there, so we will need batteries. So lead time will be affected, service level will be affected. So challenges are there, clear, and we still don't see an active reaction from the whole industry in terms of how we can handle those batteries to get the proper service. And I'm not talking about the OEM, I was only talking about the whole industry. Like, we don't see a proper reaction like, someone is taking the lead, we can make it, you know? We don't see that. At least I don't see that from my perspective, yeah.
No, and I do think there are technologies there and there are platforms that allow that collaboration and that sharing of data and that information. I think the challenge is that it's getting people on board with those platforms. They haven't got, especially lower down, as already said, they haven't got the capital to invest in those systems. So it's about how can we join together, and we've seen it in the food industry recently, right? So we've seen certain businesses forming like joint ventures. So we saw it with Palmer and Harvey and Costco, where they formed the BICO, and that failed, largely due to Costco's supply chain models of how they manage their inventory and their stock. But things like that could revolutionize how we implement these systems and data. Can we join together and jointly purchase software and jointly be responsible for that and sharing that together, rather than, I guess, what we typically see and have historically seen, where it'll be led by the larger businesses, so the OEMs will dictate, we all need to be on this platform, we need to share our data. Well, that may cut out 10% of your supply base because they simply don't have the money to buy that platform. I think we need to think of different ways of how we can support each other, and that could translate even into joint warehousing. So people could jointly own a warehouse and jointly store goods and products in it, and it doesn't have to be an assigned section or assigned area. It can just be, for that day, I've got 3 containers coming in, and you've got 2, and then the next day I've got none, and you've got 5. And I think different approaches, and we need to think about it in a completely different way, and maybe not even specific to automotive alone.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah. Maybe Peter, you've got some ways in which you can come together with some of your members to help. Maybe we can get a microphone at the front for Peter, please. So as I was saying, just how could the UK Warehouse Association help in this circumstance?
Thanks. Yeah, Rachel, really good point. And I think actually from a warehousing and logistics point of view, it already happens, because that's basically what third-party logistics providers do, operate those activities and services on a shared user basis. And there are some developments going on at the moment to increase that level of matching demand and supply. I mean, we run a portal to do that, and there are others doing the same sorts of things. But perhaps it's in some of the other areas around technology where things are not offered on quite the same shared user kind of basis. But I would think shared user is a mature part of the 3PL market. That's really what it does, fundamentally.
Okay, thank you very much. And from an OEM perspective, Martin, you said earlier that you're willing to share capacity with the other OEMs. How do you make that work? Of course, your service parts, and there's also that discussion about how do you work from a service part perspective. You've got service parts, you've also got parts inbound to plant. So where are those opportunities for you to collaborate? Maybe I'll ask Martin to make some. He's right behind you.
Well, I think firstly we need to start speaking to each other, and we need to be prepared to be transparent with data. I fully agree with the point Rachel's just made. I like the idea of sharing capacity, sharing platforms, investing jointly in those platforms so that when we use them, they're not bespoke to each OEM, or they're not bespoke even to an industry or a sector. Because I think it's not just about automotive, it's about all sectors, and optimizing the logistics infrastructure and supply chain infrastructure. So for me, I see a big reluctance. We speak to third parties and they have other customers, but in the end, there's always a reluctance to transparently benchmark and really share data and be prepared to contract together, because there still seems to be that idea that we want to keep a competitive advantage and that there's some form of intellectual property attached to logistics, and I really don't see logistics as intellectual property, to be honest. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, Juan, what are your?
I think the same. I think we have to start talking. You said quite well. I think in the last years, for several reasons, the OEMs probably didn't talk much to each other. Obviously, there are quite clear reasons why not. Yeah. And probably in the future, we have to start talking and find synergies. I fully agree with that. And I also agree with Martin. I think logistics we should not keep the knowledge only for us. That's also clear. But we also I have to remark that we are OEMs. Some of us, we do warehousing on our own, yeah, like us. So they say the whole warehousing is done by Daimler, almost globally, not in all the places, but at least in Europe. We also need strong partners out there who can give us the proper solutions, okay? And again, I think with the Brexit, I want to be very clear, quite clear. I see people frozen, yeah? Nobody wants to move the first. Probably that's one of the reasons why the OEMs, we have to also move ourselves and do solutions, because in some specific topics, we don't see someone taking the lead in the partners area. 3PLs, for example. It's not a critic, it's the way it is, yeah. I think probably nobody wants to take the risk or something. But if we've built a framework with OEMs working together and proper 3PLs offering innovative solutions, would be the ideal picture. But I think we are failing in both areas now. Right?
Yeah, sure. So as Jeffco, of course, as a service provider, you work with the OEMs and you serve as PSA and those guys. How do you get involved in that conversation as well and start to?
Yeah, we do, and sometimes we organize. It already happened in the past, even several years ago. Huh? Sometimes we have a request for transport from one country to another one, and another OEM asks for transport from on the other side, and we try to link both contracts and to say, okay, we can share profit all together. We already did it in the past, and yeah, I think it can be a good idea, because we don't want to transport empty trucks. I mean, of course, and we don't want to rent empty warehouses. So yeah, if we can have, I mean, shared project, and I think it can be a good idea also. And about innovating, yeah, we as Jeffco, we are doing innovation. We are trying to do innovation anyway for the future. And we are trying to work on it. It won't be a revolution, but it can help. As you said, first you need drivers. Okay, just the basics, or the basics. Yes, but after, once you have your drivers, you can organize, you can find options, you can find fiscal options to find a new road. You know, perhaps it's cheaper doing it another way. We can have. I used to work for our engineering team, customs and tax engineering team. So you know, our job was to find new options and to think about things you never see in tenders. So the thing is, okay, just change your mind and try to think, if you don't have any problems, what you would do, what would be the best. When you ask the question, sometimes you find options. But we can work together, of course.
Would you say it's easier on the inbound side or on the outbound side to find those, or on the spare parts side of things, to find those synergies, to find those areas which you can collaborate?
I would say both, but inbound, yeah. Outbound is different. When you speak about cars, outbound is specific. But of course, we can work also on this on outbound. We usually work, when I speak about optimization, it's usually on our inbound solutions.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it's also on outbound.
Yeah, of course, there's similar challenges on the outbound side of things as well. I mean, of course, that's just some of the OEMs here that are responsible for moving cars in and out of Europe, right? OS. So you've got your challenges as well, right? In terms of finding drivers' capacity, those challenges remains the same, right? So how do we then set up those groups? Maybe there's an opportunity for automotive logistics to help bring people together. That's what we do, right? So maybe we should talk about that and see how we do that. But I guess we're nearing lunch, so I don't want to. If there's any other questions from the audience, any other comments that you'd like to make? There's one right there at the back.
David Baker, Baker Rose Consulting. Fascinating morning. One of the things that has struck us, which we've seen in the work that we're doing across the sector and in transport moves, is that people and actually doing the moving is as huge a problem and as huge an issue as the paperwork. And Brexit and the impact of losing people in warehousing to do the picking and the packing and to move the trucks is a massive issue. One of the things that we've done a lot of work over the years is involved in creating rail terminals and rail freight distribution facilities linked to ports, linked to major parks, and we're involved in some in the Midlands at the moment. But that opportunity to move more stuff through the Channel Tunnel, for example, where the capacity is there but is grossly underutilised, and the possibility of using more swap bodies and containers as unitized traffic allows you to drop the box, drop the load, and then somebody else can use that, and you can do something else, perhaps provides more flexibility than just using Arctics in the European mode. And there are 45-foot containers which are being used and developed particularly for trans-European and UK flows. The physical issues need to be addressed by the logistics industry in terms of Brexit, and in terms of both the wetware, as some people like to call it, people, and the hardware in terms of kit. And that would be quite something I'd like to see. Obviously, ABP are here and RFG are here, so I expect we might address that this afternoon.
Any comments on that? Sure, I think we need to explore all options at this stage. I think everything's on the table in terms of solutions that we need to find. But after lunch, we have the think tanks. So those will be split into different groups, different topics. You can see the topics are available on the app, so you can have a look at that while you're having lunch and decide which one you want to go through. Of course, Olivier will be hosting one roundtable on frictionless trade, so you can pick his brains a little bit more there. But I think we'll call that time on this session and allow you all to go and have some lunch and maybe come up with some innovative ideas yourself. So I'd like to thank the panel. Thank you very much. Great presentations. Really enjoyed the discussion. Thanks for thanks for being here. And so lunch is, as you go past reception on the mezzanine floor, there'll be signposts, and of course some of my wonderful colleagues will be able to show you where that is. So thank you very much, and thanks very much to the panel.